put this back in the stand by the piano, please? And now, I'm going to move on to a little bit of a sermonic portion of the... if you can't get it, Natalie, don't worry about it. I'll get it. Sometimes it falls out. The sermon portion. And so I just want to warn you, today's sermon is going to be just a little bit different, so I ask you just kind of, grit and bear it a little bit. I know it's not what you're normally used to, but I promise it'll all make sense in the end, or at least it'll all make sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you. So I want to start off, first off, with just a question. What are you doing to make the world a better place? Yeah, Bo. Serving God. What are you doing to serve God, man? Being good. You know what? I'm sure that your mom sees that as you serving God when you were good. Absolutely. So Bo caught on a little quicker than everybody else. I'm just going to say. I told you it was going to be a little different. One of the things that we do in JAM and we do in youth group is we do a little bit of conversation back and forth. And we have a few too many people here to do a round table discussion, but what I would like is a little bit of audience participation. So if you feel like you can answer one of these questions that I promise are not rhetorical, I would like an answer to them. Just go ahead and raise your hand. I'll call on you. And we'll do the same thing that we do in JAM and youth group. If nobody raises their hands, I'll start volunteering people, and nobody likes that, including me. It's not fun for anybody. So I'm gonna ask just one more time. What are you doing to make the world a better place? Brenda.
I serve at the
Lighthouse Pregnancy Center in Vandalia. There you go. I'm sure they need all the help they can get. Anybody else? Kenzie, what are you doing? Getting an education. That's great. I mean, ignorant people don't make the best decisions. I'd say that makes the world a better place. I'll look for one more. Yes. Yeah, showing kindness by showing people the love of Jesus. I think you said it a little bit more, but I didn't quite catch it. But yeah, no, showing kindness and showing people the love of Jesus. That's definitely making the world a better place. So today we're going to talk about a guy who made the world a better place. And his name is Hezekiah. And it's Hezekiah the reformer, because the way that he made the world a better place was he reformed the world around him. He made it into something different, something new. And just a little bit of backstory about Hezekiah. He was a king in Judah. So at this point in history, Israel had been split into two countries. It had been split into the northern country of Israel and the southern country of Judah. Now, Judah had some good kings and it had some bad kings. Hezekiah was one of the good kings. Israel, on the other hand, all of those guys were real bad. They were not good people. And so Israel was always wicked. But Judah had some good points, and Hezekiah was one of them. And so one of the things that Hezekiah did was when he came into power, he decided, okay, we're going to repair the temple. Because at this point in time, they had a few bad kings in a line, and the temple had just kind of been shuttered. Nobody was practicing worship there. Nobody was sacrificing there. I'm pretty sure it had gotten looted at one point. It's just a real bad deal. So Hezekiah decides, we're going to repair and reopen the temple. And so in 2 Chronicles 29:3, it says this: in the very first month of the first year of his reign, so within 30 days of the first year Hezekiah took over, he reopened the doors of the temple of the Lord and repaired them. And so kind of what happens next in this line is while they're repairing the temple, one of the priests finds a scroll, which is the law of God. It's the Torah. And he gives it to another guy who sends it on over to Hezekiah. And when Hezekiah opens this scroll, he just starts weeping. He just starts despairing and lamenting because he read the laws of God and realized, man, we're not doing any of this. This is bad. We're breaking the law of God in almost everything that we do. And so Hezekiah set to get Judah back on the right path. And one of the things he did to do that was reestablish the Passover feast. And if you'll remember, the Passover feast was what they celebrated the Exodus out of Egypt. This was the feast that celebrated God delivering Israel out of Egypt's slavery. And they hadn't been practicing that. And this is one of the most important feasts that the Jewish people have. And so in 2 Chronicles chapter 30, verse 1, we see, it says, King Hezekiah now sent word to all Israel and Judah, and he wrote letters of invitation to the people of Ephraim and Manasseh. He asked everyone to come to the temple of the Lord at Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover of the Lord God of Israel. Now there's something really important I want you to note there. Hezekiah sent an invitation to all Israel and Judah. Now remember, these are two separate countries at this point. They have different kings. Hezekiah is the king of Judah, but he still sent invitations to Israel because in Hezekiah's mind, we're all still God's people. I mean, my northern brothers may be doing wicked things, but they're still God's people. We were doing wicked things until just a little bit ago. So he sent out the invitation to everyone to come worship God the way that these people, these chosen people, were intended to. And then the third thing that Hezekiah did to reform the world around him was rid the country of idols. We see in 2 Chronicles chapter 31, verse 1, it says, when the festival had ended, that was the Passover festival, which, as a note, the country was wicked enough that they had to put it off a month because there were not enough priests who were ceremonially clean to actually serve the festival to the people. So they had to wait until everybody stopped doing their wickedness a whole month before they could do the Passover feast. So when the feast ended, the Israelites who attended went to the towns of Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh. Those are tribes of Israel. And they smashed all the sacred pillars, cut down the Asherah poles, removed the pagan shrines and altars, and after this, the Israelites returned to their own towns and homes. Dang. They smashed everything, put it down real good, and then they went home. Job done, right? But they didn't just go home. They went home with a renewed vigor for God. They had just read the law of God. They just celebrated the Passover feast for the first time probably in their whole lives. And so they zealously cut out all of the sin and all of the pagan idols in their country, and then they went home to live a new life following God. They were reformed into people who were pleasing and honoring to God. And so now we understand that Hezekiah reformed the world around him, and he had a lot of resources. He had a lot of riches. He was a king. He could tell massive amounts of people hey, go take down the idols in the high places. Let's fix this temple. I'll give you any money that you need. Let's do this Passover feast. Most of us don't have that kind of power or that kind of resources. So I want to ask you a question. Based on the little bit that we've heard about Hezekiah, what does his story compel us to do? Yes. Yeah, living our lives the way that God wants us to. I mean, that's what the Israelites did, and they weren't the kings. Anybody else? I'll take one more. I won't do 3 this time. That's all right. One of the things, and I think Vicki just touched on this kind of on the nose, is we're called to live our lives in a way that's honoring to God. And I'll tell you, one of the things that every single Christian is called to do is follow a commandment which is called the Great Commission. And now the Great Commission is seen in a couple of different places in the Bible. It's seen in Matthew, and it's also seen in Mark. And I'm going to read the one out of Mark. It's Mark 16, chapter 15 through 18. And it says this, "And then he told them," and that's Jesus, "Go into the world and preach the good news to everyone. Anyone who believes and is baptized will be saved, but anyone who refuses to believe will be condemned. These miraculous signs will accompany those who believe. They will cast out demons in my name, and they will speak new languages. They will be able to handle snakes with safety, and if they drink anything poisonous, it won't hurt them. They will be able to place their hands on the sick, and they will be healed." And now I want to focus on the first part because, I'm not saying I'm going to start handling snakes up here. What this is saying is, if you are doing what God has asked you to do, if you are one of the ones who believes, you will see amazing things in your life that you never could have expected and you never could have done on your own. One really important thing I want to make note of in this particular passage is the part about those who are condemned. Specifically, it says, "Anyone who believes and is baptized will be saved, but anyone who refuses to believe will be condemned." Now, that refusal isn't just somebody else's problem. Because if we are not doing our all to bring that good news to them so that they can even decide, that condemnation is on us. And so I think the answer to my question of what does Hezekiah's story compel us to do is found in the New Testament age after Jesus where we live. And it's, we have to go and take the good news to all the people of the world in the best way that we can. But now I have another question. And this one is rhetorical. You don't have to answer this one. What would be the best way to do that? In your own personal lives, what way can you reform the world around you to best preach the good news about Jesus Christ that has already affected your own life? If it hadn't affected your own life, you wouldn't be here. And I'm going to kind of answer this question myself. And I'm going to say something that most of us probably don't want to hear, that I don't really want to hear. The way that people come into church is not the same as it always has been. You see, in the past, in what we call the modern age, facts and logic and reason and apologetic arguments worked very, very well to bring people to church and bring people to Christ. When we look at the revival meetings and the camp meetings and, even the people who started our own denomination, the Christian church here, they got saved at a revival meeting. They did revival meetings. They were huge. Even up into the time of Billy Graham. Huge, huge people listening to the straight, unfiltered truth, and that was enough for them to give their lives to Christ. However, we don't live in a modern age anymore. We live in an age that we call postmodern. And the problem with postmodernism, which involves my generation after me, and the generation before me, is we don't put as much stock in facts and logic and the truth. And this isn't everybody. I don't want you to hear me say a broad generalization that affects every single person in this range. But we tend to focus more on emotional responses, how we feel about something. To be honest with you, I personally don't know anyone close to my own age who has given their life to Christ because of an apologetic argument. But I can tell you story after story after story after story of people who have given their life to Christ because somebody took time out of their day to care about them. And I don't want you to hear me say that the truth is not important, that the Bible is not important. That's not true at all. I love the Bible, and it is super important. but the way that we bring it to people has changed a little bit. You see, it can't be the first thing that we give people, because it's like opening a fire hose. It just blasts them, right? And so what I would say, the thing that draws people is relationships and connection. See, people don't crave the theological debates anymore. They don't crave just opening the Bible and reading it. I wish that they did. It'd make my life a whole lot easier. I'd just open the book and read at them, and they'd give their life to Christ. It'd be awesome. That's not how it works. And I don't say this to discredit the truth at all. Don't hear me say that. But the way it works today is you have to connect with somebody. You have to build a trust and a relationship with them before you can speak that truth into their life. Otherwise, they'll just tell you, like, no, I'll find somebody who emotionally fulfills me somewhere else. I don't need to hear you. I want to ask you another question, and this one is not rhetorical. I'd like an answer. And I know that most of you know the answer because we've talked about it in church before, and I know that the board has talked about it 2 or 3 times. Who is missing from this church? You can kind of look around and see who's missing, who's not here. Tina. The middle generations. Ben said, yeah, I would specify it a little bit, 18 to 40-year-olds. 18 to 40-year-olds. And why is that? I personally, from the things that I've seen interacting with my people, my generation, I would say it's because we don't provide what they crave. We provide something extremely important. We have the truth. But it's not packaged in a way that they can understand. And I'm guilty of this too. Because it's a whole lot easier and simpler to just lay the truth out there and walk away and say, well, it's your choice. It's a lot harder to get into somebody's life and gently give that truth to them. I've got another question, and this is going to come clear out of left field, and I'm going to ask you, just bear with me and hold on, because I promise it'll make sense. Why do people go to bars? Yes. To meet people. Anybody else? Why do people go to bars? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Connected. They can meet people. I mean, granted, some people go there because they have a crippling alcohol addiction. I understand that, But to be honest with you, most people who go to the bar, I mean, if they just wanted to get drunk, they just go buy something at the packaged liquor store and go home. It'd be a whole lot cheaper and simpler, and you wouldn't have to drive. People go to the bar to feel connected. I mean, look at what the bar has. They have pool, and they have karaoke, they have music, they have people, friends, people who will sit there and listen to you. I mean, they may be blasted out of their mind, but they'll listen to you. And man, it's not a satisfying connection there. But for a lot of people, it's the only connection that they have. It's the only place they can go where they feel even partially heard. And man, I'm going to stand up here and tell you, from the people in this room, we can do so much better than a bar can. We have the means to a truly satisfying connection, not just with other people, but with Christ. But for some reason, the place that sells booze is beating us out. So I'm going to ask another question. How do we create that connection that people crave? How do we do that? Yes. That's possible. That's possible. Anybody else have any thoughts? How do we create the connection that people crave? That's okay. It's a hard question to kind of have on the spot. I understand that. I'm gonna say that the way that I have seen to be most effective in many different ministries with many different people at a whole bunch of different points in the country is by telling your stories, by eating with people, and by making friends. And through that friendship leading them to Christ. What I suggest is the easiest way to build a connection with people is food. I mean, everybody's got to eat, right? You see, there's something special about eating with people. We see in Mark 2, chapter 15 through 17. And it says, "Later Levi invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners." There were many people of this kind among Jesus' followers. "But when the teachers of the religious law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with tax collectors and other sinners, they asked his disciples, 'Why does he eat with such scum?' When Jesus heard this, he told them, 'Healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. I have come to call not on those who think they are righteous, but those who know that they are sinners.'" You see, eating with people humanizes them. Sitting down and sharing a meal with someone turns them into Rachel, the waitress, who's a single mom with 3 kids, who struggles to keep her 92 Corolla on the road, instead of just the unwashed, sinful masses that you see on the street. It turns it into John, who just got out of a not unserious stint in prison for meth production, but who loves his children and does everything he can now that he's out of there, and he does everything he can not to go back. But he's struggling because no one wants to hire a felon. But you wouldn't know these people unless you sat down and ate a meal with them and saw them as human beings instead of just their sin. Let's recap just a little bit. We talked about who's missing from the church, and it's that middle generation, the 18 to 40-year-olds. We talked about what they crave, what they desire, and its connection, its relationships. We also talked about a way to have that connection with these people, and that's through food, through eating with them, through seeing them as a person. And so I have another question that is not rhetorical at all. Based on everything that we've kind of gone over so far, what is the solution to the problem of our missing demographic? Youth group kids, you'll recognize this little thing, because I do this to you all the time. I give you all the answers, then expect you to say it together and see if you've been paying attention. Based on the information we've gone over just here, what is the solution to our missing demographic? Marcus. Making friends. Yeah. I'll take it one step further, and I'll say sitting down to a meal with someone, building a relationship, and through that relationship bringing them to church and bringing them to Christ. I have some homework for every person in here today. And your homework is this: sometime in the next 2 weeks, I would like you to eat a meal with someone who does not go to church. The food part of that's easy. I mean, you can make a meal if you're like that. And I mean, Leah and I love cooking. You can take them out to dinner. It's real simple. I think most everybody in here has the ability to either make a meal or take somebody out for a meal. The food part is easy. But what about the people themselves? That's a little more tricky. You may be racking your mind right now trying to think of somebody who fits the description of the person that's missing that we're talking about and coming up blank. Well, I've got a place to start. Every single person in here knows somebody in this missing demographic. I guarantee it. They're the clerk at the store who always rings up your pizza. They're the waitress at your favorite barbecue joint. Casual acquaintances, teachers, your neighbors. People you see walking down the street who you kind of recognize but you don't know their name. That's the place to start. You may not know them personally, but you definitely know that they exist. And you have some semblance of a relationship with them. If that seems a little too daunting, which as an introvert, I completely understand the awkwardness of trying to invite a casual acquaintance out for a meal. It can be pretty awkward. Our church directory, reading through that, I have seen a whole lot of people who fit our demographic who I know for a fact have not been to any church in a good long while. That's your second place to start. I mean, you know these people. You see them around. The people in the directory, you know them well enough that you've probably gone to church with them before. But they're not here. At least not anymore. And I don't want you to misunderstand your homework. I'm not asking you guys to ask somebody out for a meal so that at the end of the meal you can invite them out to church. That's not what I'm asking, and I'm going to explain that in a second. You're not doing that yet. You don't want to come across like some sleazy pyramid scheme salesman where you invite somebody out for dinner and then you give them the old bait and switch and give them the old 1-2 like, hey, let's go out for dinner, and then bam, yeah, I'm asking you to church. That's just going to send people scurrying for the hills. Nobody wants that. No, your homework is to eat a meal with someone who doesn't go to church. And I'm not just talking our church, I'm talking any church. I don't want you to go out and eat with a Baptist or a Catholic, because that doesn't count, because they still believe in Jesus too, I promise. Somebody who doesn't go to church at all, or hasn't for a very long time. And so you want to eat with somebody with a singular goal of getting to know them or them and their family as people. You see, this is a baby step. This isn't the whole thing. This is step one in a rather long paper that I'm not going to tell you how many steps there are in. You can't expect somebody who hardly knows you to trust you enough to go to church with you. It's a fairly intimate thing, to be honest with you. You have to build that relationship up first. Then as time goes on and you hopefully share more meals with these people, then and only then can you invite them into your church and into your community because they trust you. I have a book in my possession, and I meant to bring it up here, and I completely forgot this morning. It's called The Art of Personal Evangelism. And it's written by an older man who has studied my generation and the generation after me and the generation before me, trying to understand why the classic old evangelism methods don't seem to work anymore. And so this book is filled with amazing information about the demographic who's missing from this church, conversation topics, ways to bring up church, ways to just talk to people in my generation. And I'll lend it to you if you want to use it. I've only got one copy, but I'll pass it around. I quite honestly think that everybody in this room should own a copy of that book at this particular point in time, because it does have so many great tips and information about reaching people that aren't here. And if you want, I can provide a little conversation grease if you want. I have some talking points or conversation cards, or honestly, play a board game, man. I've got board games that I'd lend you. I'm going to tell you just a little bit of a story. The other day, towards the end of this semester, Leah and I had Rodney and Brenda over for dinner. And the dinner was fine. You know, I already have a decent relationship with Rodney and Brenda. It wasn't awkward. But then after we got done eating, we just sat down and we played a board game. It's like a little trivia board game where we answered questions and stuff. And man, I'll tell you, through that board game, we all learned so much about each other. Way more than we ever thought we would through a board game. I got board games I'd lend you. Play Uno. Play Monopoly. Well, maybe don't play Monopoly. That just ends friendships. But I love Monopoly, but not for this situation. You see, Larry and I, we can only do so much on our own. We're not going to reach the masses of even just Ramsey on our own. We're just two guys. You see, the mark of a truly healthy church is one who has leaders that provide you all with the tools that you need to make disciples of Christ, who then go forth and make disciples of Christ, who then go forth and make disciples of Christ, and so on and so forth, etc. ad nauseum, all the way down. It's that Great Commission I mentioned earlier in action. Our job is not to reach the mass of people. Our job is to provide you guys with the tools to help us do that. One of my favorite verses in the entire Bible is John 15, 13 and 14. It's a favorite couple of verses. And it says something like this: "Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. And you are my friends if you do what I have commanded you." And that's Jesus speaking. So it follows that if we have a relationship with Christ, we're his friend. And in turn, to do what he commanded us to do, we should make friends in the way that he did. Making friends with the last, the lost, the least, the drug addicts, the people that just got out of prison, the prostitutes, the gays, everyone. The last, the lost, the least in this world. That's how Jesus made friends. And let me tell you, cooking a meal for a casual acquaintance is a far cry from laying your life down for them. We kind of put a pin in Hezekiah for a little bit to talk about what we're supposed to do based on his story. You see, Hezekiah used his riches and powers to turn the people of Israel back towards the right path. You probably don't have his resources, but your job is the same as Hezekiah's. Turn people back towards the right path. Every single person in here has the resources necessary to make a friend, building up that trust, turning them towards the right path, and eventually welcoming them into your church family. But it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do to just go make a friend, but I think I can help with that. That's your homework. Go, eat, make a friend, and through that, reform the world around you into something that's pleasing and honoring to God.